this will by no means like assuming anything, but we'll basically just take it from the perspective of somebody learning to be able to completely understand. Now, in web development, we have quite a number of components. Now, we have the front end, which is the customer-facing side of the development, which in a sense consists of the HTML, the cascading style sheets, and also the JavaScript. So pretty much those will be on the front end of development. Now, as you can see on the screen, there's normally the part whereby we get to interact with the front end, which is the browser. And that browser helps us retrieve and interact with what is in the back end, which in this case, we're gonna assume is a black box, okay? And now on the end of the black box, we have the server side, which is the language we as the programmers work with to be able to retrieve the information from the database. And the database presents that information either in the form of what we call APIs, as in application programming interface. And that information can be utilized by either a computer, as in a web browser, or a mobile application, as in Android, or as in iOS, or as in Windows mobile computer, or in very old days before everything shut down for BlackBerry, that would be the case. So our part of the study will basically be discussing the front end, how it interacts with what we call the middleware. Now, the middleware will be the languages and the database, so to speak. And of course, we have the APIs. Now, the middleware is any software that is a glue between the application in the front end and its network, or the way it controls the flow of information between an application and the server. That could be the database, it could be the operating system, and it could be the browser, and so many other things. So the middleware will be either the desktop, the operating system, the network protocol, it could be the server, it could be so many other stuff, okay? Now, we have the backend. Of course, the backend has to be there in order for us to be able to fully interact and get our request to be relayed back to us. That request will basically be, it can be in the form of, the middleware can be in the form of like a framework. Let's say, for example, we have the .NET framework, or it could be a JavaScript framework, or it could be a PHP framework, or it could be any form of framework which basically let us be able to interact with the application. Now that backend can also be in the form of API. Now, in this current age, we have a lot of interactions in the form of APIs, and most of the time, like some of the big companies which would like us to be able to use their services, provide the API, and that structure, that's the way the data structure is exchanged between the database and any other software which could be on the front end. Yeah. And now, after talking about the front and the back end, I think I'm gonna go ahead and skip the next slide. That should not be in there, but I'll talk about it once we get the gist of what we're trying to do. So now when we talk about the mobile and we talk about the web development, of course, the reason why we want to be able to talk about this in the beginning is to be able to like create some kind of career around it, so that if I practice, then I'll be able to maybe one day get a job in that field. Now, what is it that is in this thing for us? So we say the mobile and web development has a very good attractive way of rewarding the effort, and that is the salary. Okay. Now the salary, for example, for like a web developer or a mobile developer, it's not really fixed, but it depends on, for example, the city or the state where you are located in. It could also depend on whether you are in America, or you could be in Canada, or if you're in the US, or if you're in Europe somewhere, or you could be in Australia. So those basically depend on the environment, and they're very much driven also by experience. Okay, like how many years you've been in the industry and how much do you know in terms of your experience as an individual in your skill set. It could also sometimes depend on education, which in most cases is not. And I know cases whereby you probably don't really need a 2-year or a 4-year degree to be able to get into the space. It could more or less be on the experience side than on the education side. I've known people who are very experienced, but they might not have the degree, but they could be earning good enough to sustain them. And salary also depends on the language you will be developing in, as in what language you develop your websites or your mobile applications in. That will also depend. And that language in itself also depends on whether it's very much in demand. Like, you know, right now, if you're developing websites, then there's specific languages which are very much in demand, and the recruiters and the companies cannot get enough of those skill levels. So you'll be like in short supply as a person, but you'll be very much in high demand. And therefore that gives you a wiggle room to be able to negotiate with the potential employer to be where you want it to be. Okay, and that's a good thing, by the way. So the salaries.
Yeah, Migot, let me chime in a little bit. We have 1 hour, so I don't know if you'll be able to go through all the slides that you prepared. Do you think you'll be able to do that?
Yeah, I should be able to.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty confident about that. So salaries also depend on the negotiation levels and the skills at the time of the interview. So your interview, you really have to be able to be in a position to be able to know what you're talking about. And salaries also depend on the demand, like I say, and the supply of the skill you have. Okay. So I came up with some research, and basically I went through different sites, and ZipRecruiter was able to give me some of the average salary for like a mobile developer, and this is average nationally. So we're looking at anywhere between $90,000 to $93,000 a year as a mobile developer, and that also depends on experience, and that could be also going back to the hourly wage of about $45 an hour. Okay, so that's something to think about, and I think that's a good thing. Okay, now when you compare that with the salary for a web developer, on average, it's going to be about $75,000 a year, and that's a little lower than the mobile developer, but it's going to be at the range of anywhere between $36 an hour, and on average, it's $75,000 a year. And that's also a good thing to actually get started. And this is just probably the entry level, okay? And then we talk of the mobile, then we talk of the web developer. Now, the web developer could be either front end or back end, okay? And then we have the full stack developer. Now, that full stack developer will be in between one guy, but who can do both front and back end. And that will be able to command a salary of at least $100,000 a year or $49 an hour. And that's the national average. These figures could possibly be old as we speak right now because the market changes. And it could be more in demand right now as the time of COVID, which might be different 6 months from today or 1 week or 2 weeks from today. And also factoring into the fact that you also have to negotiate and the locations and stuff like that. Okay. Now, when we talk of the front-end developer, we talk of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And then HTML, CSS, and JavaScript also, they have some of what we call the framework. For example, we have Bootstrap for the CSS as a framework, and then we have the jQuery, which is also a framework for JavaScript. And then we have other components which are also good to have, like Backbone, which is a JavaScript framework. We have CoffeeScript, is almost close to what we have as in JavaScript. Okay, we also have less, but these are just a tidbit of what we have in that particular range. Someone who wants to go into this direction will probably be able to, you don't have to know everything, but you just want to know good enough for you to be able to get your foot at the door. Okay, now the middleware, the summary I have here is Ruby on Rails, which is backend software programming language for the web. Okay, and then Node.js is actually JavaScript, but on the backend side. Okay, and then we have Java, we have Scala, and we have Clojure, which is also very helpful. But of course, we have other languages like PHP, we have Java, we have .NET, you know. So it depends on what someone is intending to do. Now on the back end, as in the databases, we have PostgreSQL, we have MongoDB, we have MySQL, and we have so many other backend. And this is just a snapshot of what direction someone may be able to take. Different companies and different organizations might not need everything, but they need you to be able to know good enough to be able to solve a problem they put forward to you. Okay. All right. So the next thing will be like, how can you get into the industry? First of all, before you get into the industry or before you actually become, you could be a developer already, but before you become relevant, you probably want to check on so many other things. And one of the things for me, I think will be like, you have to be able to remain competitive in the world of development. So get one thing, do it, and do it very well. And then before you do that, then you also need to know how you can market yourself. you always want to create an environment whereby you have a network of people. People could be your friends, but some friends might not have the same interest like you. So you, in a group like the one we have, that will be able to help you to identify somebody who can also give you some tips on what you're looking for. And always, like I say, always make sure that you update your resume. Okay, before you go out there and look for things, make sure your resume is updated. Nowadays, they will always ask for your profile. Like, hey, can I see your profile on LinkedIn? Or if you're a developer, they'll always be looking for like, hey, do you have a GitHub account? Can you share some of the work you've done before so we can have a look at and then be able to gauge? You see, that in itself will help you stand out. You could be having little experience, but if you have stuff like that, with some education, we'll be able to get you in. Or you could be having little or no education in that area, but the fact that you have some of the things they need, and of course, one of the main thing will be your soft skills, then that will put you through at the door. And also, I always emphasize, you probably want to be able to always try to acquire the knowledge you can get, be on top of the technology. Try to go to some of the sites like the recruiting sites, register. That way you can get subscription of their magazine, get to know what is trending in terms of the technology. The technology will be able to help you know that, hey, we no longer need COBOL programmers. Now what they're looking for is probably they're looking for JavaScript or a Java programmer or a C# developer. Okay, and then of course, one thing I always believe in, you want to minimize your negativity if in case there's anything like on your political affiliations, on social media, and also on your profile, like professional profile. This can help you avoid being alienated by any potential employers because they look at like your Facebook account and stuff like that. So you wanna keep it very professional and neat. Okay. All right. So now our next thing, like I said, the salary, and I say those salary also depend on experience. Now, let us look really deep. Either you want to be a front-end or a back-end developer, or you just want to be a full-stack developer. If you want to be both, then you need to know the front-end and the back-end. Now, the front-end and the back-end means you have to know, we have to be rounded. So that means you're going to be a full-stack developer, and that will put you in the space of being a mobile developer. So it could be front-end, or it could be back-end, or it could be both. And if you're both, then you have to know something to do with the software development as in the mobile development. And that's going to be an advantage in terms of being able to be out there and get those calls and just kill the interview and get the job done. Okay. So, like I said, we have languages, and I mentioned some of them. Some of those languages are more popular than others. Like, for example, if you have the C#, you have the PHP, you have the Ruby on Rails, and you have the Python, you have a very good chance of getting an interview. And those are the back end. Now, on the database, you probably really need to have like PHP. You have to have like MySQL, PostgreSQL, and the node databases are always one thing which always everybody want to know if you know them. And always you really want to make sure that you include those in your resume. And I would say among the NoSQL databases would be like Firebase or MongoDB, among so many other databases which are available there. Okay, and then the next part still talk about the salary. Of course, we've already mentioned those, but under the JavaScript, as in the front-end developer. For a full-stack developer, you'll have to know at least some frameworks. Other than the jQuery framework on the JavaScript, some of the new frameworks which are very good to know will be like Angular. Angular is very popular. You really also want to get some grip of React JS, which is it's like this was put forward and designed by engineers at Facebook. And of course, Angular was designed by engineers at Google. So these are well-tested open source frameworks, which are very good to know. If you can study at least one of those, you'll stand a very good chance of getting your foot at the door. Another one, which is also very popular, is Vue.js. Vue.js is pretty much very easy. It's easy to learn compared to React or compared to Angular. So those are some of the things you probably want to look at. And of course, there's always the back end of the database, or it could be the API. You want to be able to get hold of that too. Okay. So again, that just emphasize the back end and the front end. And I will not delve too much into this one, because it's basically explaining what we just talked about, the language for the backend and the language for the front end. And of course, I hope this will be something we can also share, because it's going to be in a PDF format, and then you can download at your own time and get to read them. Okay. So we talked about the languages we use on the web, and we wanna be very specific in terms of the operating systems. Now, on the web side of things, we have the Mac operating system, the Linux operating system, and of course we have the Windows. And we know those three are very common. So once they're common and you're a front-end developer, you should be good to be able to know some of the commands as used in the Linux environment, or as used in the Windows environment, or as being used in Mac operating system. Now Mac, for those people who use Mac operating system and Linux will pretty much be very close, because those are just variations of the same thing, but different variations in terms of the commands you'll be using. So this is something you probably want to make sure that you bug and then put very safely. So you cannot be a software developer or a web developer or a mobile developer without necessarily knowing the command you'll be using for the operating system. It's very important. All right, so you go, again, this is just elaborating the same concept, what you really need to know in terms of the front end, in terms of the web backend, and also in terms of the databases. Okay. Now this was just for those people who are probably still very new. I basically just break it down here, whereby you'll be able to see exactly what the HTML, how it interacts, and how it gets to be passed as in the web. Yes. Somebody asking a question? Okay. Yeah, passed as in the browser. Okay. So that next slide is basically a very declaration of how we get started with HTML. And for those people who have not been in this environment, I really encourage you to reach out, get started, because you cannot say you know JavaScript and you know, let's say you know CSS without knowing HTML. HTML will be the basic part of it. HTML is the backbone. So this will be something good to jump in. And I can guarantee you, if you're really dedicated, it might not even take you more than a week to know, because this is not even like a computer programming language. It's just a markup language, okay? And of course, we are talking of HTML5, which is the end thing right now, okay? Then, of course, I went in there. I basically showed you what each and every tag is for. And those at your own time, you can always go through those. And that will be able to help you to see how like a web browser basically consume that and change it into what you'd like to be able to see or view for mostly on the front end. Okay, and then of course, those are the tags we have. Basically, it's all in English, so it should be very straightforward. But I'll be able to share this and also be able to share some of the links where you can possibly go get if you want to learn. For example, you want to learn HTML, you can get it at a specific point. Go through that from A to Z, finish it, and then if it has questions you can answer those, and then try to test, self-test. Once you self-test, then you should be able to be confident enough to tackle, like have a project in mind, build it, and then take it to the next level. The same applies to JavaScript. The same applies to CSS. The same applies to any language. You want to learn a language by trying to speak it. So when you speak a language, you make mistakes and then you correct yourself. Okay, that's just how this is being passed. Passed as in P-A-R-S-E. So you pass that, and then the browser basically interprets it. And then go to the next one. Now, that is done with the web development. Now we're talking about the mobile application development. Now, when it comes to mobile, it's very specific. Now, in this environment, we have the Windows, we have the Android, we have the iOS, and of course, to a lesser extent, we used to have the BlackBerry, but BlackBerry, we don't worry about it for now. Because right now we talk big about the Android, and we talk really big about the iOS. Those are the main ones. To some extent, Windows, we can go in there, but Windows, once you know C# and you know quite a few things, it's easy. So in BlackBerry, just to mention just a few things, this is no longer being worked on, but they used to use JavaScript, CSS, HTML, and of course C and C++. Java and JavaScript are totally different, two different languages. So don't get those confused for those people who might not know. Okay. And then now when we go into iOS, the language which is very much in demand is Object-C. And of course we have Swift programming language. It's a middleware. In the backend, we may use an API call or a database, and this could be a SQL relational database or a graph database or a NoSQL database. And some of the most popular databases are MySQL, Microsoft SQL, Oracle database, SQL, SQLite, Postgres, Cassandra, MongoDB. So those are some of the very common ones. And of course, of late, we have the Firebase. Firebase is part of a tool you can even get for free if you have like a Google email address. Sign up and then you can try it there. If you have any question, feel free please to reach out so you can get some guidance. And this is something which can really help a lot. Now, in the mobile development environment, Microsoft sometimes back bought Nokia. So they thought it's going to be a success. Apparently, it's never worked out like that. But we still have Microsoft mobile development. And if you want to go in that direction, you probably want to go in the direction of doing the .NET. In the .NET suite, we have C#. C# can help you do Xamarin. Xamarin is a framework which is basically open source. And that will be able to help you also if you have knowledge of Visual C++, or you have like, they have other solutions like Visual Basic in there. And that will be able to help you to also design other applications as in iOS and Android, because once you can touch CSS, JavaScript, and HTML, you basically can go across the board in any mobile development, and that's an advantage. So it's a good thing. Okay. Now, in Android, the language of choice in doing development in the middleware is Java. So Java does very well in Android. So Android was based on Java. Okay. Large parts of Android are written in Java. The APIs are designed to be utilized primarily from Java. It's also possible to develop C and C++ application for Android, but Google does not emphasize very much on that. That means you might not get a lot of support in terms of when you're stuck. So you probably want to make sure that you can only do this if you do it on your own, but not for a project, because you might not be able to debug some of the issues you might be getting. So you want to stay away from that, but it's available for you. So they call it Android Native Development Kit, or NDK, though not commonly used, okay? Now, other top programming languages for Android, right now, the big one we talk about most of the time is Kotlin, which is a cross-platform programming language that may be used as an alternative to Java for Android development. Okay, we can also use Python. Okay, I like Python. So Python comes with another framework, which is, we call it Kivy. Some people might call it Kivy, and these are very well known for Android app development. It's very easy to learn and very quick. You can put something real quick as, say, for example, you have an example you want to show a customer, or you have something real quick you want to develop just for your portfolio. It's a good way to go. Okay, C# can also be used in Android development. So, and then we have Corona/Lua can be used. Now, Corona is a development kit that uses Lua programming language for Android app development. So just for your information, this Corona thing was not was not even in the radar when they came up with this one. So these are not even related, just for your information.
We're getting scared.
Yeah, so don't get scared. All right, now,
okay.
We have
if I may ask, because we have to have some 15 minutes for Q&A, how many slides are you left with?
Oh, we have 6 more slides, which is less than what you really, probably another 2-3 minutes we're done.
Okay.
And then QA. Okay. Is that good?
Yeah.
All right. I mean, if somebody has any burning question, feel free. We can chew gum and walk at the same time. All right. So again, on mobile development, we also have PhoneGap. Pretty much, I would say most people probably have heard of this. And PhoneGap is basically a framework, so to speak. It's just a conglomeration of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which can be used, okay, together. So PhoneGap is more or less of a framework specifically built with a bundle of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It allows the creation of Android apps by relying on the same code base used to build websites. Okay, so PhoneGap, as the name suggests, bridges the gap between Android application layer and the Android hardware layer. The camera, the accelerometer, the GPS, the microphone, you can design and code those directly from your PhoneGap application. And that's a beauty. That means you basically interact with the hardware part, which is a good thing. Okay. Another language which is also very popular, very easy to learn. If you know HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, Ionic is an open source front end, SDK. So SDK, almost like API, but it's a software development kit. It comes, you just double click it, then it's installed. It's used for developing hybrid mobile applications. Hybrid in the sense that you can develop both iOS and Android using Ionic open source framework. Okay, using web technology such as HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now, Ionic has its own command line, which is a good thing. You can manipulate it. It has interface too, which is quite helpful in scaffolding. Scaffolding in the sense that you can create a boilerplate of what you want to be able to get started with. So just create a command, bam, and then it gives you a starting template and the folders and everything, okay, for code to get started. All right, now we talked of the web, and then we talked of the mobile. Now, not so many companies create mobile applications because it could be due to cost. So in the process, we have something in the middle, and that thing in the middle, we can create a website which can also work as a mobile entity for our own company, for example. So you don't have to create a mobile app. And that is what we call PWA. It's a progressive web application. And it's a type of application which, when delivered through the web, built using common web technologies, including HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It's intended to work on any platform that uses standard compliant browser. Now, a PWA site can work on both a mobile, small screen, and the same configuration as it is can also work on the large screen jumbotrons. Okay, PWA is the way of the future. Most of the web applications, okay, to work as if they are mobile application. When you have a good PWA, it is almost tantamount to having killed two birds using one stone. So it's good for your budget. It's good for business. Okay. All right. Now, another one is why do we need web application as a business? For example, people spend most hours on online each week, and mostly on the phones, which also most cases are smartphones. So for example, a business to be discovered online, the online presence is essential. A website therefore acts as a digital business card for a company where people come and repeat coming. You know, a website for like e-commerce, people can buy stuff from you, people get to know that you're available. So it could be late in the night in East Africa or somewhere in West Africa, but it could be daytime over here. So when you have a website, you still, if it's an e-commerce, you still get orders, which is pretty good, okay? So it's great added value to customers and great for customer service. People get to send email and stuff, okay? So we know why we need that, the same reasons, okay, which is also just elaboration on the next or the first one. And then the careers of this one, those will basically be something we can get online. And of course, I articulated them here. Okay, so career trends in software development, okay, talk about IoT, talk about cybersecurity, talk about language and framework, the blockchain, the mixed reality, we call the MR, and combination or the augmentation of those. Okay, and then data science, big time, artificial intelligence and machine learning, okay? Those really get into what we've been talking about, some of the languages, the progressive web application, the low code development, the code quality and outsourcing, okay? And then of course, the last part of that. So thank you guys. And that brings to the end of our session today. So we have a session for Q&A.
Thank you, Migot Ndede. It's time now for Q&A. If you have any questions, please go and ask the questions. Okay, I'll start if people are quiet.
All right.
So on the aspect of the progressive web applications, so if you build a progressive web application, is it possible to put it on the Play Store or iOS store?
Probably not. Progressive web application is for the web in the form that, in the sense that when you build it, you put it on the server, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when it's on the server, I can access your web just the way I would be able to access any other website. But it has the inbuilt responsiveness, whereby if I have a small screen, it will be able to sense that. And when it senses that, then I'll be able to see your whole website, but on my small screen. So the PWA makes the web technology get the responsiveness whereby one website can always be viewed on a small screen, big screen, medium screen, and all that. So it's not something you can put out there in let's say in the marketplace as an app to be downloaded. No.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Let me ask. I have a question. Actually, I have a couple of questions. Huh?
Sure, please.
So the first one is for those of us who are not from development or application development side, what's the difference between a developer, a programmer, and a software engineer? And then my second question would be, people ask me sometimes, and I'm sure all of you get asked this question, where should I start? And sometimes if somebody's interested in, for example, programming, I'm unable to give the best answer. Which of the languages you said, which one would you suggest to somebody that to lessen their learning curve or to make it softer, which one to go first, which one to go for first? Thank you. Those are my two questions.
Okay. So I'm gonna start answering you from the second question. Now, if you want to get into development, you probably want to look at some of the areas you want to go into. Do you want to go into application development, as in designing just applications for, let's say, the old style of doing applications, which are not in for any web presence? If you're doing like, say, you go the old way of C++, you just develop application for, let's say, a company, which all they need is just point of sale terminals. Then that will be different from getting into application development as in the web or the mobile. So that's going to be something you probably want to find out where you want to start first. For me, I would probably advise, it's normally very easy to get into web development. And if you get into web development, the first language you really want to learn, for me, I would suggest to you, it's going to be HTML as a markup language. And then the second one, which is also very easy, will be your CSS, which is cascading style sheets. Now that's going to be on the presentation. Now the HTML is going to be on the layout. And then if you want to be able to automate between the layout and the presentation layer, then you also learn the JavaScript. So that will be one way of getting in. Now, once you get into the web development, it will be very easy for you to get into mobile development, which will be very specific in terms of what you really want to learn, whether the iOS or the Android. And again, once you get to know the CSS, the HTML, and the JavaScript, those will help you a lot when you come into mobile development, because mobile development also uses the same languages and the same concept. So it's going to be just a matter of, if you want to go to, let's say, you want to do Android, then you're going to be looking at Java. Java as in Java, not JavaScript. or you want to look at Kotlin, which is also part of Java as in Android. So that would be one way of looking at those. But if you want to go the direction of, hey, I want to join this company, let's say the company is known as, for example, NEC, and I just want to do development, and I want to do their development for their switches, for development for their routers, then you'll be talking of either C++ or you'll be talking of very low language level as in C, then that will be development as in going into that direction, right? So it might at one point take you to the direction of, hey, maybe they want to add some kind of plugins, then that will come with the territory, okay? Now, answering your other question, the difference between developer, programmer, and software engineer depends on who you talk to. And these are very interchangeable terms. For me, I would think like a developer, once you can develop anything, whether it's just a JavaScript, then you're a developer. Now, if you can develop, say, JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, put it out there, then you are still a developer. And now, programmer is just, you build a program. So if you build this program in JavaScript, then you're a programmer. So it depends on who you talk to. Developer, programmer is all good. Now, say for example, you eventually end up like in a company. The company might just give you a title like, that's our software developer. Some company might decide to call you, that's our programmer. And some company might just decide to give you a name as, that's our software engineer. So for me, I would say maybe the engineer, we probably want to say if they have some kind of, and of course they might not necessarily need to have a degree, but depends on how and the kind of respect the company would like to give you. So there's really no big difference in my eyes, because I've seen and personally I've held all different positions, but they don't play different roles. The same thing, yes, company to company, person to person. Did I answer that for you?
You have, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Any other question? Questions, don't be shy, guys. It's interaction. Okay, if there's no question, I have a question as well.
Yes.
Ionic versus PhoneGap.
Yeah.
Which one is the most used one, and which one would you recommend?
So Ionic and PhoneGap, that's a good question, but I would probably not tell you which one is the most used one, but I know PhoneGap is relatively recent compared to, I would say no, PhoneGap is relatively older compared to Ionic, and I hope I'm not mixing them up. So remember, they more or less do the same thing, and depends on the kind of experience one has on each. Some people might find it easy to grasp Ionic and be able to put something out, but they all use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which in the PhoneGap might be very different the way it's being handled in Ionic. So that's one thing I'll probably, maybe I would suggest you go online and look the user levels. And again, some of this might also depend, if you go to Europe, you find a lot of people using one and not the other. For example, in Kenya, a lot of people are using Android, but very few people are using, let's say, iOS. So Ionic and PhoneGap, that's one thing I will also want to find out, because again, the support you get when you work on a project. If a project is, you're able to finish your project on time because you get a lot of opportunities whereby if you encounter, say, for example, an error, then you can look it up and quickly you get a solution to the problem. And how they handle that problem, is it straightforward for you to be able to just capture and then be able to go to the next one without like having to burn the midnight oil? Just going to be a nightmare. So those are some of the things I would probably be looking at. But again, I would probably look and see which one. But I've been able to look and work with Ionic, and I think it's very cool.
Okay.
Yes, and I see a lot of books out there which are more or less on the Ionic side compared to what I would be able to see on the PhoneGap side. So I'm not really sure if PhoneGap is dying, but I know PhoneGap, sometimes they change names. Like there's something they call Cordova, which I believe, if I'm not wrong, one of the companies, and I think Adobe came in and bought PhoneGap, and then they changed the name. So they revolve and they evolve. Yes,
Okay.
yes,
we have 2 minutes to go. My last question, if there's nobody else asking, would be, I think you talked about Kotlin being a cross-platform language. So you mean if I develop my application with Kotlin, it will be able to be supported on all the operating systems?
Yes, so Kotlin is pretty much on Android side. Okay, now it's very much supported by Java. Okay, it's based, I would say, almost like a Java framework. But you see, iOS might not support it. You can only port in the sense PORT, port a particular software for one operating system to work on the other. So Kotlin is I would say Kotlin is to Android as Swift is to iOS, if that makes any sense.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Did that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay.
Do you have any questions before we call it an evening?
Yeah, I noticed you didn't mention some others that I've seen being used, like Microsoft Visual Studio or PyCharm, which where I see them, they seem kind of popular.
Okay. So say your question again, please. I'm sorry.
I said I noticed you didn't mention them. Maybe.
Oh, okay. So you see, PyCharm, just like Visual Studio, those are integrated developed environment. Like you can just decide, today I just want to develop using Notepad++. So depends on what tool you want to use. You can decide, I want to use NetBeans, or I want to use Eclipse for developing in Java. So when I go to Visual Studio Code, I would probably say I would just want to use Visual Studio Code for developing in JavaScript, because sometimes some of the IDEs might not be able to highlight some of the syntaxes because they lack the plugins which are required for you to be able to identify an error in a particular line number. Right. But if you have, say, Visual Studio, you are well placed to work with say C# than if you have to use PyCharm for C#. But if you're using PyCharm to develop your Python or your Kivy development tools, then you will stand a very high chance of getting a lot of help, because the IDE is built for that environment. So those are just, we call them building tools, so to speak. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, so those who want to get the slides and get the information for Migot, Migot, please share your email in the chat. And also, if you want these slides, please put all your emails in the chat, and I should be able to basically send you the recorded session, or I'll be sharing that as well to all the platforms that we have. Otherwise, thank you again, Migot, for the wonderful session. I believe everyone has learned a few things or a lot. And yeah, so please, as the session has ended, please just put your emails in the chat. And